You are listening to Viewpoints from Place Cloud. Cultural researchers tell stories of places from around the world. For the full multimedia experience and to support the creators you enjoy, visit placecloud.io.
Blue plaques are a familiar sight in London, and there are nearly 1,000 official plaques in total across the capital. The scheme started in the mid-19th century, the first two plaques commemorating Lord Byron's birthplace in Cavendish Square, subsequently demolished, and Napoleon III on King Street in Westminster. These early plaques are brown, the blue colour only becoming standard by 1921. Sometimes the blue plaques make for interesting conjunctions. At the houses now numbered 36 and 32 Tavistock Place, we find a record of two unlikely neighbours. In fact, their time here didn't quite overlap, but if it had, they would have had much to talk about. In 1908, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, founder of the USSR, lived at what was then number 21. 20 years earlier, number 19 had been occupied by Jerome K Jerome, dramatist, editor and author, now most famous for his book, 3 Men in a Boat. Lenin only lived for a short period at Tavistock Place, while he was writing his philosophical study, Materialism and Empirio-Criticism, a book which would later become required reading for all students in higher education in the Soviet Union. He had chosen Tavistock Place for its proximity to the British Museum Library, where his reader's pass was issued under the pseudonym Jacob Richter. But this was not Lenin's first stay in London. On previous visits, he had spent a lot of time observing workers and taking buses from Oxford Street to the slums. Nadezhda Krupskaya, Lenin's wife and later an important Bolshevik politician in her own right, recalled how, observing these startling contrasts between wealth and poverty, Ilyich would mutter in English through clenched teeth, "Two nations." Jerome K Jerome was born in the West Midlands to an ironmonger and lay preacher father. Bad investments caused the family to fall into poverty. They moved to the East End, where Jerome grew up in exactly the kind of setting which 40 years later would make Lenin so angry. While he was still in his teens, Jerome's parents died, and he took on a succession of jobs as a clerk, teacher, and a failed repertory actor. At the age of 26, he found literary success with a comic memoir of his time on the stage, and 4 years later, his novel 3 Men in a Boat won instant success, selling more than 1 million copies worldwide in 20 years. Despite Jerome's experience of poverty, his attitude to the kind of socialist reform pursued by Lenin was at first far from sympathetic. In The New Utopia, a short story published in 1891, he satirizes his advanced friends. "We raised our glasses and drank to equality, sacred equality, and then ordered the waiter to bring us green chartreuse and more cigars." The short story anticipates the great dystopian novels of the 20th century, particularly Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Jerome imagines that he has slept for 1,000 years, waking up in a drab, perfect, reformed future taken to extremes, in which everyone looks the same and people born stronger or cleverer are surgically altered to bring them down to an equal level. Later, Jerome became a socialist himself, although exactly when is not clear. If Jerome and Lenin had overlapped in their residence of Tavistock Place, politics might not have been the biggest source of tension, however. Jerome is now remembered as a humourist, but it seems that Lenin hardly had a sense of humour at all. "A sense of humour is a splendid, healthy quality," he once told the Russian writer Maxim Gorky. "I'm very appreciative of humour, though I've no talent for it myself." Certainly, British writers seem not to have been very impressed with Lenin's jokes. H.G. Wells met Lenin in 1920 and described his laughter as grim, while Bertrand Russell recalled Lenin's laughter at how he had incited poorer peasants to rise up and kill richer ones. "His guffaw at the thought of those massacred made my blood run cold." Jerome, who was outspoken against cruelty, would no doubt have found this equally distasteful. Perhaps it was for the best that 2 decades separated these unlikely neighbours in Tavistock Place.